In our postmodern age of division, anger, anxiety, and confusion, the most dangerous weapon you have is your own mind.
Take control! Question everything!
This is the Intellectual Freedom Podcast.
If you are easily triggered, you might want to skip this episode. Nah, just kidding, because if you're listening to the Intellectual Freedom Podcast, I highly doubt you are easily triggered. But for real, in Book 5 of the Republic, in this episode, Plato is about to take a sledgehammer to everything you hold sacred. Maybe that's a little dramatic and it's not everything, right? But we're going to get through this episode just fine together. Welcome back to the Intellectual Freedom Podcast. I'm Dr. David Hopkins, humanities professor and your host and guide through a 10-week march through Plato and the Republic. And hey, believe it or not, we hit the halfway mark in the book with this episode. So if you're reading along and still taking it on, congratulations, proud of you. But if you're not, hey, no worries, just listen in. We'll cruise right through there. So if you were with us last week for book number 4, we went internal. We mapped the civil war inside your head, inside my head. We talked about the lizard brain versus the driver, and we defined justice as a kind of mental health, getting your own house in order and having that mental balance and control between logic and reason versus our passions and our appetites. And honestly, if Socrates stopped there, we'd have a nice little self-help book. We could wrap it up, go home, feel good about ourselves because, hey, we've already covered some pretty heady territory in this particular episode. But Socrates, well, he doesn't just let us off the hook right there that easily. And today, as we hit book number 5, and let me tell you, if book 4 was kind of the psychology chapter, book 5 is the revolution. And this is where things get radical. I mean, radical with a capital R. This is where Plato predicts feminism 2,400 years early. This is where he takes a hammer to the nuclear family. Yikes, this one gets a little scary and makes us all pause. And it's in this book, book 5, where he drops the most famous political sentence in human history. Scholars and many others call this chapter the 3 waves. And why? Because Socrates warns us that what he is about to say is so shocking, so countercultural, that it's going to hit us like a tsunami of ridicule. And even today, I mean, what he says in this chapter is out there for sure. So many of you know the story of how and why Socrates was put to death, right? He disrespected the gods, and more importantly, he was accused of corrupting the youth. They claimed he was turning the young men of Athens against their fathers and against the traditions of the city. And today, when we work through chapter 5, I think you're going to get more of a flavor of how that perception was actually out there and how that could have happened. So check your sensibilities at the door. Open your mind, suspend your judgments, because this book, book 5, it goes there, and it goes there unapologetically. So let's set the scene first. Before we get to the arguments, Plato is a dramatist. He's not just a philosopher. So Socrates thinks he's done by the end of book 4. I mean, he was pretty damn eloquent and impressive explaining justice after it had been hashed about and bandied around for the first 3 books of the Republic. He's finished defining justice of the soul, and he's ready to move on to the next topic, in all honesty. He's literally like, clapping his hands together, like, okay, let's move on. But he doesn't get to leave. I want you to picture this. We're back in the house of Cephalus. Remember, that's where we started this whole thing at. It's probably late at night, at least as I see it. There's no factual thing to this. The wine's gone, lamps are flickering, and suddenly Polymarchus reaches out and he just kind of grabs Adamantus by the cloak on the side. He leans in and he whispers something, and Adamantus nods in agreement. I think we've all have been in those situations at different times where people are talking, but they're not talking with us. They're talking about us or kind of sharing some hidden little secret. Well, that's kind of what you're getting between Polymarchus and Adamantus at this point. But then Adamantus, after he nods in agreement, he says out loud, no, Socrates, we aren't going to let you go. And Socrates stops. The room, I can imagine, goes silent, and he asks, what are you arresting me for now? And Adamantus looks him in the eye and says, you're cheating us, Socrates. You gave us this nice little slogan earlier. Friends have all things in common. That sounds great, but you skipped the hard part. Does that include women? Does that include children? You don't get to leave this room until you explain how sex and family are going to work in this city. And after hearing this, Socrates kind of sighs. And I kind of envision just the exhaustion. And he knows that as soon as he opens his mouth, since they want to go there, since they want to get into sex and family, he's going to go there. He's thinking, oh my gosh, they're not open-minded enough. They're not going to get this. And he goes, I'm going to sound insane to the average Athenian for sure. And I kind of imagine Socrates was feeling like a guy at that party who's about to ruin the vibe. It's like walking into a room full of TikTok self-help modern influencers and telling them that self-love isn't really a virtue. It's actually a mental illness. I know, don't cancel me. I'm just a messenger. But that's exactly how radical this is about to sound. And it's like Socrates knows it. So Socrates, he says, quote, you're stirring up a swarm of arguments. It's like swimming against a massive wave. But they still won't let him leave. So he decides, he dives into it. And he's like, all right, let's go. And so here comes the first wave that you'd read about in this chapter. The idea that the soul has no gender. And the belief in a radical meritocracy. And 400 BC Athens, during this time, this would be absolutely scandalous. You have to remember back then in Athens, women were basically property. They lived in the women's quarters. They wove wool. They didn't speak in public. They definitely didn't hold public office. And for the quote unquote democracy of the age, it was really only for landed citizens, aristocracy based on name and land and title for the most part. So who in the world is this guy to come out with the idea that the soul is equal in men and women? And what you can do is way more important than your last name and the land you hold. I mean, wow. That's revolutionary for the time. And no wonder Socrates didn't really want to go there and was nervous to start the conversation. Socrates looks at the two men and asks a simple question. He says this, quote, if we use wash dogs to guard a herd of sheep, do we say the female dogs are too weak to hunt? Do we keep them in the kennel to clean the bowls? Or do we train them to hunt, just like the males? And Glaucon admits readily, we train them the same way. The female is physically weaker, sure, but her nature, her instinct is the same. And boom, Socrates drops the hammer. He says, the soul has no gender. The soul has no gender. Now, for us to hear that, it's not that big of a deal, right? But you have to remember the time that we're talking about. And Socrates, to say this, is radical. I mean, radical. So if we're building a city based on merit, and if you recall the different levels, the gold, the silver, and the bronze souls, why would we care about their biology? That's Socrates' argument. If a woman is born with a gold soul, if she has the capacity for reason and philosophy, she must be a guardian. She must rule. She must receive the same education as the men. And here's the kicker that made Greeks laugh him out of the room. He says she must exercise naked in the gymnasium with the men. They are 100% equal. Now, stop giggling. He's not trying to be a pervert here. He's making a point about meritocracy. Plato is arguing for the blind audition. He's saying, I don't care who you are. I don't care about your identity. I care about your capacity for success, your capacity for truth, the capacity for justice, the capacity for honesty. And if you can do the job, you get the job, period. The useful is the beautiful, is what he said. The useful is the beautiful. That was the first wave, and frankly, we're still arguing this today, right? We still struggle with this. Meritocracy, true, unadulterated meritocracy, may just be a pipe dream in practice across civilizations, but in theory, I think most of us would think it's good and true and ethical and honest, right? I mean, MLK Jr. talked of this, to be judged on the content of our character and not the color of our skin. Now, Socrates is on the gender thing in this particular spot in this book, but race, gender, ethnicity, social class, I mean, it all falls in line here with Socrates. And to this very day, we still have not figured this thing out completely. I truly believe we made some amazing strides in so many, many ways, but dang, we haven't cracked the code in practice to create that perfect city like Socrates and his cohorts here are trying to build in his model city. And Socrates firmly believed in meritocracy. Okay, so the room is already shocked, and that one statement could have been enough, but Socrates still isn't done. And since they asked for it, he gives them yet another thing. And here comes the second wave. And this one has a real jagged edge. Socrates asks, quote, okay, so we have men and we have women that are ruling together. But what happens to the babies? Who changes the diapers? His answer, no one and everyone. He proposes the total abolition of the nuclear family for the ruling class. No private marriages, no private houses, no private parenting. He sets up a system of what he calls sacred marriages, which, let's be real, are rigged lotteries. A little bit of eugenics here, folks. Let's not gloss this over, to produce the best children. So basically, Socrates is saying, look, if we have gold people, they need to breed with gold people. So breed the gold men with the gold women, the silver men with the silver women, the bronze men with the bronze women, so on and so forth. But once that child is born into the highest class, the guardian class, it is taken to the quote unquote, as he called it, pen, like a pig pen. The biological mother never knows which child is actually her child after she gives birth. Every child is born in a certain month, calls every adult of a certain age father and mother. Now, while you're recoiling at this, because I can feel it, because even to say it feels a little bit icky. It sounds like a cult. Sounds like the Brave New World with Huxley when we were talking in a prior series comparing 1984 to the Brave New World. It's eerily, in a sickening sort of way, sounds like Hitler, the Nazis and their master race. And geez, when I read this, it is a little cringy, right? Why on earth would Socrates say that? I think a lot of people get behind the meritocracy thing, right? But oh my goodness, what do we do with this? Why on earth would the smartest men in Greece, or one of the smartest, propose destroying the nuclear family? Think about that. What if you were going to steel man this, or if you were gonna try and advocate for Socrates, why on earth would he think it's a good idea to destroy the nuclear family? Because Socrates believes the root of all political corruption is just one single word. That one single word is mine. Mine. So before we judge him and before we rule it out, think about it. Why do politicians embezzle money? If you were Socrates and he was talking to us right now, he'd say to help their families. Why do leaders give jobs to incompetent idiots? Well, a lot of times that nepotism, maybe it's their nephew. Fun fact, the word nepotism comes from the Latin nepos, meaning nephew. So Socrates is basically arguing this. If I care about my own biological son more than your son, the city ultimately breaks. The city will ultimately fall to corruption. Tribalism destroys justice in the world of Socrates. But if every single child is my son, if I look at a 20-year-old soldier and I think that could be my biological child, I fight for him differently. He wants the city to feel like one body. He uses the hurt finger metaphor. When you smash your finger, you don't say, my finger hurts. You say, I hurt. The whole body rallies to fix that part. If you've ever smashed your finger, yeah, you can feel it in your finger first, but that pain will radiate, right? Any kind of injury you've had. So let's be real. In theory, it sounds all right. And in theory, you can make a case that what he is saying is actually true. But let's be real, right? Every time history has tried this, Mao's China, the Soviet Union, the Nazis, weird communes in the 70s, it's always ended in disaster. It's always ended in disaster because we humans need our specific attachments. But you have to give Socrates credit for the diagnosis. Private interest is the enemy of the public good. True. His means of wanting to go about it, now that's another story. And even if I can't agree with Socrates completely here, I can say this. Man, how disgusting is it when our politicians put their own power and their own money above the people? How often do we hear from both the left and the right, these dirty, corrupt politicians care only about themselves and their party and their power? They don't really care about the people. Heck, I've talked about this so much. Politician A enters Washington, D.C., and I don't question. I've never met a Washington, D.C. politician, and I don't know them personally. So, but I do have to believe a lot of them enter politics with the best of intentions, and then suddenly lobbyists comes forward, comes to the politician, talks about why they should not vote for Bill XYZ. And even if the politician knows probably good for his constituents, he follows along with the party line, and the lobbyist takes the money. And why? Why? Why would he betray his constituents he is sworn to represent? Well, if generational money is at stake, are you so sure and so certain you would be completely honest and ethical? Or maybe, just maybe, you take the money, knowing that the money will put your family in a position of generational wealth. No matter how us average people suffer because of it, I mean, the whole eugenics thing Socrates talks about, that's super ick, right? No doubt, but his rationale of why the nuclear family should be abolished from a completely detached, practical, utilitarian sense, it isn't actually all that crazy, is it? But I leave that for you to ponder. Maybe ponder what's another alternative besides completely annihilating the nuclear family, as Socrates is talking about. As with life, there's really no perfect, super clean answer. But then our friend Socrates, he's still not done just yet. He's got one more. The room is just in chaos over this. And Glaucon basically yells, "Okay, Socrates, stop. This sounds amazing, a city of total equality, total unity, but it's a fantasy. It can never exist on Earth. Stop dreaming and tell us if this is actually possible." And Socrates says, there is one change, one single change that would make this real. But it's the biggest wave of all of them. And I can sort of imagine a dramatic pause here. After the first two waves and bombshells, they're thinking, what in the world is coming next from this guy? He says, the problem with our world is a separation. The people with power, the kings, the politicians, the guys with the guns, they don't have any wisdom. They don't have any wisdom. The people with the wisdom, the philosophers, the scientists, the thinkers, they have no power. So as long as these two groups are separate, the world will burn. There will always be chaos. There will always be wars. There will always be division. There will always be hate. So to Socrates, we have to fuse these two things together. And here it is, maybe the most famous sentence in this chapter, and one of the more famous sentences in the entire book. It's this. He says, quote, "Unless philosophers become kings in our cities, or those now called kings adequately philosophize, there is no rest from ills for the cities, nor, I think, for humankind." And there you have it. This is known as the philosopher king. This is the ultimate answer. This is Socrates' ultimate answer to the clown world we live in. We're always looking for the adult in the room, aren't we? My goodness gracious, the politicians we have. I mean, what a clown show. What a set of cartoon characters. Oh, and as I often say in my podcast to people that are hard on the Team Red or Team Blue, I'm not on either one of your teams. I'm not. I don't want to be on your teams, will not be on your team. The two-party system, from my perspective, is a train wreck, and it's destroying our country slowly from within because of the clowns we get on either side of the aisle. A misfit band of 80-year-olds mixed with younger, loud, obnoxious children. So I think we can all relate to a certain degree with Socrates here. There's a bunch of us that are tired of the narcissists. We're tired of the career politicians who only care about the polls. We're tired of technocrats who have data but no soul. We want a leader who actually knows truth. Plato says, until power learns to think, or thinkers learn to rule, don't expect peace. Until power learns to think, or thinkers learn to rule, don't expect peace. And for me, right here, mic drop. Shout amen or give a finger snap if you like, whatever you want. But really, what a profound statement. Until power learns to think, or thinkers learn to rule, don't expect peace. Now, Glaucon asks a dangerous question to wrap this thing up. Okay. All right, Socrates. But who is a philosopher anyway? Do you mean people who like learning new things? Because there are a lot of people who love going to festivals and hearing new music. Are they philosophers? And Socrates laughs and says no. He calls those people sight lovers. Oh, this is just perfect for our day and time today. Sight lovers in Socrates' world, who are they? They love beautiful things. They love the spectacle. They love trendy things. They love the hot take. They love the drama. They live in the world of opinion. Philosophers, on the other hand, to Socrates, they love beauty itself. They don't look at the beautiful object. They look at the source. They have knowledge versus opinion. How can I frame this in a modern way? Think about the influencer economy, for example. We're drowning in sight lovers. We're drowning in people who curate the aesthetic of a good life, but have no idea what a good life actually is. They know how to produce an image of what the good life might actually look like or feel like, or what they believe other people want to think a good life is, but it isn't real. Sight lovers are image chasers. Socrates says the sight lovers are dreaming. They're asleep at the wheel. It's a facade. It's a holographic image. But if you try to touch it, there's nothing there. The philosopher is the only one who is awake in Socrates' world. This is the red pill moment of the episode. So the question is, how is the philosopher the only one who's awake? To understand this, you have to understand how Plato defines dreaming. He doesn't mean sleeping. He means that dreaming is a sort of a state of mistaking the image for the reality. Think about it. When you are having a nightmare, you are sweating, your heart is racing, you are terrified. Why? Because you think the monster is real, but it's not, of course. It's firing neurons in your brain. It's an image. It feels very real when you're going through it, but it's not. Socrates says 99% of people live their entire waking lives in that same state. And here's the mechanism. The sight lover sees a beautiful person or a beautiful car, beautiful painting, whatever, and they say, that is beauty. They fall in love with the thing. Remember, the thing. But what happens? The person ages. The car crashes. The painting fades. because the thing changes, their happiness changes. They're on an emotional roller coaster. That job that they thought was going to be the greatest thing ever and it was going to satisfy them for the rest of their life doesn't. That money that they had so much money and they thought that was going to bring them happiness, doesn't. They're slaves to the temporary. They're obsessed with the particulars. The philosopher, on the other hand, sees the beautiful person, acknowledges they are beautiful, but he also realizes that person's just a reflection of beauty. He doesn't fall in love with the reflection, tries to look at the source. He loves the form of beauty itself, which never changes, never ages, never dies. So to be awake means you stop falling in love with the shadow on the wall and you turn around to see the fire which is causing it. Most people are chasing success, the image. The philosopher chases virtue, the reality. Most people are chasing likes, the opinion. The philosopher chases truth, the standard. If you're obsessed with things that can be taken away from you, you are asleep. Let me say that. I want to make sure you get it. If you are obsessed with things that can be taken away from you, you are asleep. You're living in a fragile nightmare. To be awake is to anchor your mind to things that are eternal, unchanging, and real. When stuff goes backwards, upside down, bad. But those things that are inside of you that never change go with you, you're awake. If you're so obsessed with your job and you get your pride and your joy and all of your things from your work and you lose your job and you fall apart, you were asleep. That's the difference. One's watching the movie screen, the other's looking at the projector. That's a lot. I mean really a lot to take in one chapter, but my challenge to you, reflect on this. What is your foundation? What are you anchored to? Can it be taken away from you? Are the things that you're anchored to, are they fragile and change? Or are they so deeply embedded in who you are that no matter what happens to you in life, they're eternal, unchanging? Then you're awake in the minds of Socrates. It's a very tough question. And not a question you can maybe arrive at and answer in just, a 30-minute podcast or however long we've been going here today. So the conclusion, we've survived Socrates' 3 waves, feminism and meritocracy. The soul has no gender. Heck, communism, fascism, Nazism, this idea that the nuclear family must die to save the state. Wow. And then the philosopher king, the wise, must rule. But this leaves us still, again, as usual in most chapters, a massive problem. We got a problem with this here, right? Socrates just told us the philosopher is awake and everyone else is dreaming. But what does that actually mean? What does that mean? Sounds good. Yeah, sure, I get it. I understand it. But what does it mean? How do you walk it out? What does it mean to see the truth? How do you take the red pill, wake up from the matrix? To explain that, Socrates is going to need a metaphor. It's going to need a cave. It's going to need a fire. It's going to need some shadows. So next episode, we're heading into book number 6. Now, before we go, I know what some of you are thinking. We just ended on this massive claim The philosophers must be kings, but let's be real. When you look at the philosophers or the intellectuals in our modern world, you don't see kings. I don't see kings. You usually see people who are socially awkward, out of touch, maybe even dangerous. You're thinking, these philosophers, if these guys run the world, we are absolutely doomed. And here's the twist. Socrates would agree with you to an extent. And next week, we're going to look in the eye. He's going to look us in the eye, and he's going to admit that in our current society, sadly and unfortunately, the true philosopher is useless. And he's going to explain why by using one of the most famous and savage metaphors in political history. It's called the ship of fools. And we're going to find out why the smartest people are usually ignored and why the most talented souls often end up into the worst villains, and how the great beast of public opinion is actually the thing that corrupts them. So book number 6 is the diagnosis of why our leadership is broken. So glad you were along for this journey. As usual, we don't have a big resolution. We shall continue peeping in and peering into this conversation in the next episode. I hope you won't miss it. I'm Dr. David Hopkins, and don't be a sight lover, be a truth seeker. And thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.